Hello and welcome to the Occult London podcast. This is a new podcast dedicated to exploring magic, mysticism, the Qabalah, as well as many other topics of interest. In this episode today, we will be talking about the sphere of Tipereth, which is at the centre of the Tree of Life. So we'll begin with the correspondences. So in terms of the title, Tipereth is known as Beauty. The name of God is Yehovah Eloah Vedat, which means Lord God of Knowledge. The archangel is Michael. Some people also attribute Raphael to this sphere, so they are kind of relatively interchangeable from that point of view, depending on the perspective. The angelic hosts are the Malachim, which stands for kings. The astrological correspondences is Shemesh, which is the sun. And the tarot correspondences are the 4 sixes and the 4 knights, or the princes of the pack. The elemental correspondences of air. The path text for this particular Sephira is as follows. The 6th path is called the mediating intelligence, because in it are multiplied the influxes of the emanations, for it causes that influence to flow into all the reservoirs of the blessings with which these themselves are united. The magical image of the sphere is a naked child with golden hair standing with its arms upraised, a king in robes and a crown of gold, and also a king sitting on a throne. Other images that are relevant would be the crucified man or the sacrificial king as well. Symbols for the sphere would be the cube, a cross of 6 squares, and also the truncated pyramid. And it's also known as the microprosopis, or the lesser countenance. The colours of the Sephira are in Absoluth, clear rose pink, Bria is golden yellow, Yetzirah is rich salmon pink, and Isaiah is golden amber. The correspondences in the microcosm are the imagination in the Ruach, and the correspondences in the body would be the solar plexus, and the grade of initiation would be a 5-6, which is Adeptus Minor. So just to go through kind of the basics of this particular Sephira, because it's a very important one on the tree. This sits at the centre of the tree, so it's kind of the vital heart and the centre. Its name, Beauty, gives us a really good understanding of the natural harmony of things, and its role is really to provide harmony and balance on the tree and ensure that all relationships are kept in harmony. It also gives us the idea of the union of the solar and lunar powers, and the sphere is kind of a mediator between the two. If we consider the word mediator, it can give us some kind of insights into this. And obviously a mediator is someone who attempts to make people involved in a conflict come together, kind of like a go-between. So this can be seen as a mediator or a diplomat between the higher forces of the tree and the lower forces of the tree, and it essentially provides a harmonising influence following the destructive nature of the Geburah and a strengthening and harmoning influence of ascending the tree from Malkut and also before the testing of Geburah. So from the point of view of the 3 triads, this sphere is the axis mundi, or the intersection between the ethical triad and the astral triad, and it's here that the ideas and concepts of what forms will be manifested lower down the tree are really sort of solidified and passed through into the astral triangle to actually be formed. This mediating influence of Tipereth is expressed very well in the following quote. As a mediator, Tipereth is seen as a connecting link between higher and lower states of being, the higher self and the lower self. This sphere is a 2-way switch, which both receives the influxes of the emanations from above and causes that influence to flow into all the reservoirs of the blessings. Tipereth's natural position on the central pillar along its androgynous nature allows the influences to combine, multiply and increase, and it's the outward manifestation of the higher, subtler Sephiroth, as well as the spiritual principle behind the lower and more manifest spheres. So as a centre of equilibrium, we can kind of describe Tipereth as being Keter on a lower scale, and also Yesod on a higher arc, so it kind of acts as a gateway between the worlds of force and form. And this is particularly relevant if one considers the magical images of Tipereth as being a child, if viewed from Keter, and then also a king if viewed from Yesod, and a sacrifice to God if viewed from the point of view of the transmutation of force into form. Alistair Crowley had this to say about Tipereth, which I think was quite relevant. This Sephira is in some respects the most important of all. It is the centre of the whole system. It is the only Sephira below the abyss which communicates directly with Keter. It is fed directly from Chokhmah and Bina, and also from Kesed and Geburah. It is thus admirably befitted to dominate the lower Sephiroth. It is balanced both vertically and horizontally. In the planetary system, it represents the sun. In the system of Tetragrammaton, it represents the sun. The entire geometrical complex of the Ruach may be regarded as an expansion from Tipereth. It represents consciousness in its most harmonized and balanced form, definitely in form, not only in idea, as in the case of the number 2. In other words, the Son is an interpretation of the Father in terms of the mind. Tipereth is thus representative of the 4 elements at their practical best. Its neutral position on the central pillar, along with this kind of androgynous nature, also allows it to combine different influences within it. So it's obviously the outward manifestation of the higher and subtler Sephiroth, and sort of, as well as the kind of spiritual principles behind the lower and the more manifest spheres. So although the spheres above are kind of usually described in sort of abstract principles of force and form, this Sephira is traditionally seen as being within the human reach, and that's also where it fits in with the position as being the base of the Holy Guardian Angel. It's a mystical sphere, and its experiences include the following: the vision of the harmony of things, the mystery of the crucifixion, and the beatific vision. These titles usually refer to the tradition that the Holy Guardian Angel sits within Tipereth, and again it refers to Tipereth as being kind of the mirror of Keter. Dion Fortune said this of this relationship: in Tipereth, God is made manifest in form and dwells among us, i.e. comes within range of human consciousness. Tipereth, the Son, shows us Keter, the Father. In order that form may be stabilised, the component forces out of which it is built must be brought into equilibrium. Therefore do we find the idea of the mediator or redeemer inherent in this Sephira. When the Godhead in its very self manifests in form, that form must be perfectly equilibrated. One might, with equal truth, reverse the proposition and say that when the forces building a form are perfectly equilibrated, the Godhead is very self-manifesting in that form according to its type. God is made manifest among us when the conditions permit of manifestation. Having come through into manifestation on the planes of form in the child aspect of Tipereth, the incarnated God grows to manhood and becomes the Redeemer. In other words, having obtained incarnation by means of a matter in a virgin state, i.e. the Mary Mara, the sea, the Great Mother Bina, a supernal, as distinguished from the inferior mother Malkut, the developing God manifestation, is forever striving to bring the kingdom of the 6th central Sephiroth into a state of equilibrium. This is further borne out by the following. The name Zohar Anpin, or lesser countenance, as distinguished from Arik Anpin, the vast countenance, one of the titles of Keter, further bears out this idea. For the formless formulation of Keter takes shape in this, the sphere of the higher mind. As previously noted, Keter is reflected into Tipereth. The Ancient of Days sees himself reflected as in a glass, and the reflected image of the vast countenance is called the lesser countenance and the sun. But although a lesser manifestation and a younger generation as viewed from above, Tipereth is also Adam Kadmon, the archetypal man, when viewed from beneath from the side. That is to say, of Yesod and Malkut, Tipereth is Malek, the king, the husband of Malchah, the bride, which is one of the titles of Malkut. Essentially what she's saying is that through striving to achieve our higher self in Tipereth, we are well on the way to achieving enlightenment. However, at the same time, there must be a sacrifice in Tipereth of the old lower self in order to fully accept this initiation. The name of God for this particular Sephira, as I've said before, is Yehovah Eloah Vedat, or the Tetragrammaton Eloah Vedat, which is Lord God of Knowledge. And the archangel, as I said before, is Michael or Raphael. Raphael in Hebrew means it is God who heals, and the root of this word also appears in modern Hebrew word Rophna, which means doctor of medicine. In the Christian tradition, Raphael is responsible for healing. In Islam, he is the fourth angel known as Israfil. And this particular quote is quite good when he talks about Raphael with Azazel. Bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudail, and cast him thereon, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face, so that he may not see the light. And on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire. The name of the archangel Raphael only appears in the biblical book of Tobit. So the book of Tobit is considered canonical by the Catholics, Orthodox and some Anglicans, and he appears first disguised as human form as one of the travelling companions of Tobit's son. So he's called Azarias, the son of the great Ananias. During the course of the journey, the archangel's protective influence is shown in several ways, including he binds the demon in the desert of Upper Egypt. He also heals the blind Tobit, and as a result of these kind of miracles, he's venerated as a saint. Raphael is sometimes shown as standing atop a large fish or holding a caught fish at the end of a line, and this is again a reference to the book of Tobit or Tobias, where he told Tobias to catch a fish and then uses the gallbladder to heal Tobit's eyes and drive away Asmodeus by burning the heart and the liver. As I said before, there's two different archangels that are attributed to Tipereth in different systems. So obviously Michael is another one. I personally prefer the using the Raphael. That just feels more relevant to me personally, but I think they both hold good stead, and there's lots of different interesting connections one can make with either of them. One of the big things about Tipereth, which it's worth sort of talking about, is the fact that Tipereth very much acts as a harmonising force in the centre of the tree. So it's a mediator between above and below. And, as we've seen already, there's different images associated with this sphere. So the child, the king, and the sacrificed god. These in themselves, we could say, could be representative of the three stages of initiation. So when we begin our journey, we are a child. When we grow older, we're a king. And then in order to progress, we must die and be sacrificed and reborn again. So this can be seen as a sort of cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth. And this is one of the reasons, I think, why Dion Fortune calls this sphere the giver of illumination, when she says the following. It consists in the introduction of the mind to a higher mode of consciousness than that which is built up out of sensory experience. In illumination, the mind changes gear. So if we look at the pattern and the design of the tree, we can see that Tipereth receives its light directly from Keter. Therefore, the light of illumination that Fortune is talking about is really that sort of divine seed of light from the divine passed through to the initiate in Malkut via this mediating intelligence of Tipereth. So it's kind of shone through this lens, and traditionally we are told that if we receive the full impact of that light, it would destroy us or kind of set us a long way back in our journey. So this is very much relevant in terms of the child, the king, and the sacrificed god. So when we begin our journey into the mysteries, we must act as a child and go slowly. And another quote that's relevant from Fortune is, "We must accept the fact that the child Christ does not spring like Minerva full armed from the head of the Godfather, but starts as a small thing, humbly laid among the beasts, and not even housed in the inn with the humans. The first glimpses of mystical experience must perforce be very limited, because we have not had time to build up through experience a body of images and ideas that shall serve to represent them. So we need to kind of begin each day like a newborn child, fresh and new to the world, and try not to kind of lose our sense of childlike wonder and joy with the world, as in the kind of the innocence of the fool. There's real wisdom and power. The phrase from the Proverbs is quite relevant here when it says, "out of the mouth of babes and sucklings," for it's really kind of in that rediscovery of that childlike innocence, that the true sort of inner beauty can be found, and also that contact with the holy guardian angel. The holy guardian angel, just quickly to kind of make a point on, is meant to live within this sphere, and it's also here that we kind of get that first signs of higher intuition and mediation. So the forms and astral shapes that you tend to find on the lower astral triad kind of begin to fall away when we come to this particular sphere and we face that sort of dweller on the threshold. So the dweller represents all that kind of holds us back on our quest, all of our doubts, all our fears, all our insecurities, and we need to find that strength so that we can kind of go through that, and as it says in Zanoni, "Be behind what there may, I raise the veil." So we need to find that strength to face ourselves, and this is why there's a very big emphasis on the candidate making a connection with his higher self, or the highest being on the tree before any work, as this kind of acts as a guide and strengthening force when we face the sort of darkest aspects of ourselves. Phil Hine talks about this quite well when he says, "To be initiated in the magical sense of the word is to recognise that you're moving through a threshold of change, that you are in a period of transition. The key to understanding initiation is recognising consciously what is happening, rather than simply wondering what the hell's going on. For many magicians and pagans, the recognition of moving into a period of initiation is marked by a ritual or magical retirement. Thus, in this context, an initiate is someone who is intensely aware of his or her condition and is surfing the crest of the wave rather than struggling to hold it back. Initiation is a time of letting go. It is a time of loosening up, when habits, beliefs, attitudes and self-identification suddenly or gradually seem to lose concrete than they were previously. One's grip on normality may be temporarily lost, only to be eventually, one hopes, regained, but not quite the same as it was before. Dealing with this loss of certainty and the necessary confrontation with self can be difficult at times. Some never manage to go the distance and instead opt for fantasies wherein they are mighty adepts, rather than accepting their own humanity, which necessitates a degree of humility, to say the least." So while if we think about it from our terms of the day-to-day, we're very much affected by the kind of ebbing and flowing of Yesod and its sort of tides of change across the subconsciousness. However, when we get to Tipereth, this is really that light of that sun that's shining that light onto those darker elements of us, and it kind of gives us that strength to sort of face our demons without fear. And transformation really begins with us facing those darkest selves and realising that they were a friend of ours after all. And that's something you see quite a lot in some of the fairy tales as well. So there's for instance, like Beauty and the Beast, or other Grimm's ones. There's lots of themes of it's a monster who then becomes a positive force when the spell is broken. So it's a similar thing with us. We need to kind of be friends with our demons, and so we can overcome them and integrate them into ourselves and make ourselves stronger. As Rudolf Steiner put this quite well in his book, Knowledge of Higher Worlds, when he talks about the dwell on the threshold. So, "Yet my threshold is fashioned out of all the timidity that remains in thee, out of all the dread of the strengths needed to take full responsibility for all thy thoughts and actions, As long as there remains in thee a trace of fear, of becoming thyself the guide of thine own destiny, just so long will this threshold lack what still remains to be built into it. So this unification of the lower and the higher selves occurs once that dweller on the threshold has been faced, and it gives you that opportunity to drink from the Holy Grail. The gods and goddesses of Tipereth, so as we've previously mentioned, there's several different aspects which can be taken into consideration. If we look at it from the point of view of Keter, which is the highest point, obviously, Tipereth can be considered a child, so we could see it as the sort of Christ child or the infant Horus, or other innocent heroes such as Parsifal, the Fool. From Malkut, if we look at it from Malkut, we can see it as a king or a solar king, so that can be things such as Ra or Osiris, and also the sacrificial god. So Tipereth has the aspects of the sacrificial god. My personal perspective on that is it's very much kind of to do with the sacrifice of the lower self in order to find union with the higher self. So this is represented in Christianity by the sacrifice of Christ on the cross, and in Buddhism by the concept of the Bodhisattva. Other sacrificial gods would also include Osiris, Odin, whose trials on the tree. So there's a particular synergy here with Odin's liver being pecked by ravens, as this is one of the symbols of Raphael. And obviously from those three aspects, you can also, as we've said previously, see that formula of initiation, which is described as follows. The kingdom is dying, the king must be sacrificed, and out of that sacrifice becomes the rebirth as a child. And this is a basis of a lot of different initiation ceremonies. In the words of the Golden Dawn ceremony, buried with that light in a mystical death, rising again in a mystical resurrection, cleansed and purified through him, our master, O brother of the cross and the rose. Like him, O adepts of all ages, have you toiled. Like him have you suffered tribulation. Poverty, torture and death have you passed through. They have been but the purification of the gold. So, yeah, that kind of covers up our discussion on Tipereth. Thanks very much for joining this week on the Occult London podcast. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Please make sure to visit our website at www.occultlondon.co.uk, where you can subscribe. And we also have a Facebook group as well. I hope you found this show useful. Please get in touch if you've got any questions or comments. And I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thanks, bye.